Hey everybody, so glad you're here today in today's conversation that I'm having with a special guest, a friend, and a fellow Silva Method instructor. We're going to explore the laboratory and counselors concept. It is an awesome tool. You want to make sure you listen to the end because we're going to explore together. And our guest now, Matt, is going to share some of his daily routine and how we can use the laboratory and counselors concept, which is the second thing that started it all way back between 1944 and 1966. Mr. Jose Silva started with an act of love, helping his children learn faster, learn easier. And he was guiding them into what became known as the alpha and theta state, this relaxed state. But then they started anticipating his questions accurately. They started guessing, if you will. They started accurately. And that's in the 1953 to be exact, when Mr. Silva realized he was onto something of far more importance than just improving memory. And that's when he started exploring healing. So we're going to look at healing at a distance. It's a concept, but it's a very viable concept that all over the world people have used. So this is going to be what we're going to look at, and we'll do our best to share with you some takeaways to get you started at least with this idea. So let me say a little bit about our guest. Is this something I started doing? Those of you who know me, my name is Ken Coscia. I serve as the training director for the Silva Method. I'm the lead instructor. I'm the guy Mr. Silva graced me by picking me, selecting me, handpicked me in 1984. I started when I was 19 in 71 to work with instructors to help develop our instructor team, to travel the world to do advanced presentations, our advanced course, as you will. And it was me, Mr. Silva, and a couple of other people. There's just four of us. So in that time, I have been to over 30 different countries repeatedly. I have met hundreds of instructors, many more, hundreds more who have come into what we call the certification training. And every once in a while, there's somebody who stands out. Well, not just one person, but a few. And I am so thrilled to say that in the recent years, I've had the pleasure to work with a new group of instructors. And this particular guy's name is Matt Carey. He teaches in Florida, in the Orlando area, Central Florida, we'll say. Sometimes he might go a little bit more north, a little more south. I'll let him share that with you. But this is a man who really is a standout because he is so heartfelt. And I hope Matt doesn't mind me saying this, but he's a senior citizen like myself, a mature, responsible guy who ran very successful businesses, worked with the Veterans Administration, and really was, I don't like using the word retire. I don't believe in retirement, but ready to hang up his work, so to speak, and sit back more. And here he is now working, conducting, facilitating silver classes. So to me, that really moves me because he is an example of somebody who is clearly in this for the love of it, for the mission, for the purpose to help humanity to evolve. I've gotten to know him. It's hard to keep track of time, but over a number of years with that. And he also facilitates some of our graduate groups. And I mean, I could go on, and I'll let him share things that are appropriate. So if you would, let me welcome Matt Carey. Hey, Matt, how's it going,
Hey,
bud?
Ken. Things are going great here. And I love the fact that I'm here with you today talking about this. I know you wanted me to talk at first a little bit about my background. I first discovered Silva Method back in 1987 when I was on the Rochester Institute of Technology campus. I was working as a counselor for Veterans Affairs, and I was also a full-time student. And one Monday morning when I opened the office, one of the other counselors came in and he dropped a book on my desk, a little blue book, and he said, "Matt, you got to read this book and you got to take this class." So I took a look at it and I said, "Well, I can definitely read this book." At the time, I didn't figure I could take the class. I was going to school full time. I had two kids. I was working three part-time jobs to pay for school. So I read the book This is a newer version of it. My old one disappeared. Um,
Let me show them the older This is the
there
original
you go.
version,
That's
written
that's the one that got dropped on my desk.
1973. And by the way, if you have not read this book, even if you've attended the class, it's chock full of takeaways,
Yeah.
practical applications. It was written by the founder and co-written by a professional writer, Philip Mealy. And to this day, people come into the class because they've gotten such great value from the book. And of course, there are many who haven't, but whether you take the class or not, we call it the immersion of Silva life and intuition system. This will definitely give you tools to help you navigate the chaos and stay in command of your life.
Well, I read the book. I followed all the instructions and I learned to use Silva Method basically on, well, I say on my own, but with Jose's instructions from the books. I did the 40 days and all the countdowns, and I started using it in my life, and I could feel changes just from doing that. It helped me become a calmer person. It helped me to concentrate more. I had a lot going on in my life at the time. It helped me with my golf game. It helped my concentration there. And about every 2, 3 years over the years, I would be going through my bookshelves and I would see the book and I'd say, "Oh, I need to read that again." And I, for quite a few years, about every 2 or 3 years, I would reread the book and do some of the practices from it. Um, it wasn't until more recently I had moved here to Florida with my wife Andrea, and I had been buying houses from the banks and rehabbing them and selling them, and we had a really good stretch of that and did well with it. And after the pandemic, we did really well on one of our houses, and I decided I needed to take a break from it. Um, the housing prices got too high, and I didn't want to buy anything then and get stuck with a house. So I took some time off from doing that. And meanwhile, I pulled the Silva mind control method off my bookshelf again. And I was sitting there reading it one afternoon when Andrea walked through the living room, and I said, "Honey, I got to find out where they're teaching this class and take it." And she goes, "What is it?" And I showed her the cover of the book, and she goes, "Oh, well, I'm a Silva graduate." And I said, "Oh, I wasn't really aware of that." And apparently she had taken it in Manhattan back in the 1970s. So she got a head start on me with it. But at that point, I found Keith Harmeyer down in South Florida. He was teaching here in Florida at the time. I took the class with Keith and I said, "I know what I need to do from now on. I need to share this with other people." And that's where I started my journey to becoming a Silva instructor. Um, I attended with Keith 2 or 3 times and we became friends. He asked me to sit in and on his graduate group, his biweekly meetings. And there were 2 or 3 times, and he was going through some stuff and asked me if I would take over his group meetings for him. And then, of course, he introduced me to you, and that started me on my journey of becoming a Silva instructor. And here we are today.
Whoa. Hey, Matt, I'm laughing with you about your wife Andrea starting. It's funny how often couples or good friends, somebody does. I've had people show up in my class and they'll look, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And this is somebody who's their neighbor, their next door neighbor, or who they see regularly, but they
Yeah.
didn't know they were both interested in this. And that's part of also, I think, a takeaway that's so important is we become by proximity, just like the people we spend most of the time with. And too often, when people embark on something like personal development, spiritual development, for people who don't understand, they ridicule. And if the person's not strong enough, they close down or don't share, or it doesn't bring them out. And I'm so glad that that had to be a funny moment as your wife already a graduate attended, which I would think made it easier for you.
Oh, yeah. And we attended that first class together. And like I said, it led me to sitting here with you today. Um,
Before we go further like into the lab,
yeah.
can you share what are some of the things you personally experienced when you went through the class or even reading the book and you're playing with the tools, the techniques?
Um, well, I mentioned a little while ago that it helped me with my golf game.
Uh,
I grew up golfing. My dad was an avid golfer. He was very athletic. And when I was about 10, he convinced my mother that he needed a caddy on the golf course on Sundays, which was really just an excuse so I didn't have to go to church where they spoke in Latin. So I started out pretty young. And over the years, I became a pretty good golfer and I would golf with my dad. And as I got better, he was a very competitive guy. And when you're golfing with somebody, when they're up addressing the ball and getting ready to hit, you're not supposed to talk or make noises. You let them concentrate. And as I got better, as I was getting ready to take a swing, my dad would say something like, move your right hand over top higher or whatever. Just, it was the competitiveness in him. He was just trying to break my concentration a little so I wouldn't golf better than him. After I studied Silva Method and I went out golfing with him, I would remind myself that noises do not distract me. I would take a couple of deep breaths. I would feel myself go to level and then I would hit the ball. And it got to the point where he just couldn't distract me at all after that. And we had some pretty tough competition between the two of us over the years after that.
that's a good one. That's a good one. Is your dad still alive?
No, he passed away back in 2004. Uh, but we did a lot of golfing right up until just a couple of years before that. So,
Very cool. Very cool. So, if we look at to stay on point here, laboratory and counselors, there's so
yeah,
much in the method. It's a 4-day training, 40 hours. There
right,
are over 15 different tools, techniques for personal development that we as instructors teach. The forte, though, the primary mission of the Silva method is to awaken and develop intuition. A lot of what we do in day one and day two is creating a path to the higher self, to open people up to become more self aware of who we are and our connection in the universe, so to speak. And you, me, most people just don't recognize how much better you are than you think you are. You don't give yourself enough credit. So, this laboratory and counselor concept is, I think, a brilliant work of art. The reason for the term, Matt, if you don't mind me saying, was back in Jose's day when he was researching, he was ridiculed quite a bit. There was a lot of investigating going on, which actually helped us. The 70s was really the heyday for our brand for the Silva Method because everybody was writing about it and everybody was questioning. And back then, journalists actually reported, they would go through the class and report their experience and others. And it was quite amazing and awesome. And of course, that brought a lot of attention. So the term laboratory implies, in Jose's mind, then, Jose never went to school a day in his life, science. And he attempted to be as science based as he could. As time has gone by, we instructors often have encouraged people. It can be your own personal workshop, your own personal inner sanctum, your own inner place of retreat. We don't always have a day off. We don't always have vacation. But we can always pause for 30 seconds, a minute or so, close our eyes, and imagine as if we were there in this, shall I say, happy place, this calm place, this place that if time and money were no object, you'd be there in a heartbeat. And we invite people to create this. And then the counselors serve, there's many interpretations as our guides, one male, one female. If you're a fan of Napoleon Hill, yes, similar to when Napoleon Hill talked about his imaginary board of directors, it's
right.
not a completely new concept, but Mr. Silva put together ideas in such a way and structured that people wouldn't have to spend 20 years, studying them. So anyway, in a prior conversation, Matt, you were telling me about some of your daily practice, and I wonder, would it be okay? Could you share with our listeners here, thinking of people who have either been through the training or maybe never have, how this could be used to help them themselves and the people they care about.
Okay. Well, before I get into my daily practice with my laboratory, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. when I took the course with Keith back a few years ago, this technique, this concept just resonated with me immediately. I love going to my laboratory. My counselors are amazing. Their names are Bob and Helen. We have regular conversations. They're great people. I mean, it hit me and it sunk in. And I mean, I use a lot of our concepts and techniques, but this is the one that I come to on a regular basis. And I've gotten to the point where I use it almost daily. I can give you an example of the first time that it wasn't the first time that I used it, but the first time when I realized how powerful our laboratory and counselors were. Um, I'll, about 3 years ago, I was turning an old gas riding lawnmower into an electric mower. And I bought a kit from a guy and I was following all of his instructions and I had put this thing all together. And the mechanical parts of it were very easy for me because I've built things and fixed things my whole life. And then it got down to the little electronics and the computer controller. I was having such a difficult time. And I got it all hooked up and I took it out for a test drive and it went around my lawn in a circle. And I said, "Oh, this is great. I did it." And I turned on the blades to get the blades turning, and the blades started turning, but it quit moving forward. And then when I would turn the blades off, it would start moving forward again. And I was like, "Oh, I got some wires crossed in here." So I headed back to my garage with it. And on the way back, something happened. Some wires shorted out and it burned out the computer in it and wouldn't operate anymore. So I did some checking to rebuy that computer was almost the price of the kit. The guy I bought it from, by the time I would ship it to him to try to fix it, if he could fix it and then ship it back, same thing was almost the cost of the kit again. And I said, I kept telling myself, there's got to be a less expensive way for me to get this thing rolling again. And after a couple of nights, I sat down at night. I went to my level for my nightly meditation that I do every night before I go to bed. And I went to my laboratory. I spoke to my counselors. I said, give me a clue here. There's got to be something out there that I can do to make this thing work. And that night I had a dream and I was in my laboratory. My counselors were looking at me and I was explaining the situation to them. And my male counselor put his finger up like this and he turned around to a bunch of bookshelves and he went through a whole bunch of books and he got down near the bottom and he pulled a book out and he never said a word to me. He just pulled the book out, lifted up, and showed me the book. And I was like, "Oh, I know that book." The next morning when I woke up, before I even made my coffee, I went right to my den where I have bookshelves back here, and it was actually on the shelf behind me, down towards the bottom. Because he looked at the bottom, so I looked at the bottom, and there was a book that I had bought back in the 80s or 90s on how to convert a gas car to an electric car. It, it had been sitting on my bookshelf for many years, collecting dust. It was one of those things I was interested in but didn't pursue. And I pulled it out, and it was the exact book that he showed me in my dream that night. And in the book, there was a whole section on the electronics on how to use golf cart components to convert a gas car into an electric car. And I could use the same things to turn this gas tractor into an electric tractor, much, much cheaper than the computer that the guy sold me in the kit. Because these golf cart parts, you can get them everywhere, especially here in Florida. So there was my counselors, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you got the answer to this. The book's in your den on the shelf." And there it was. So there was my answer. And I just said, "Wow, how amazing is that?" I went and asked my counselors for help. They showed me exactly what I needed, and there it was.
Well,
Um, I knew at that point that this laboratory and counselors was just so powerful and so important. Um, and that was my first big indicator of it.
man, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I never heard that story from you. Let me just comment a little bit for
Yeah,
listeners. Just when Mr. Silva first did this, is mid-50s, the counselors were presented to his children, the young Isabel in the instance, because she was having some fear, some apprehension. So she was making believe as if mom and dad were always guiding her there, so she wasn't the idea alone. But instead, Isabel imagined two people, Tom and Mary, no one that Jose knew. And it was one of those things Jose would say, oh boy. But just like Matt said, she would get information somehow, some way, and say the counselors guided her, told her, and information. She was doing medical intuition work. No way she could have done this at that early age. She hadn't even gone through elementary school yet, and she would come up with information. So over the years, I just wanted to add, because a lot of you who are not familiar with the Silva method and you're watching this still, it's also a tool that has, as time evolved into a tool to facilitate the flow of information. And what I hear you saying, Matt, is you had in a dream, so you're connecting with the counselors, asking for guidance. Some people would call the counselors, like if you could have a conversation with somebody from the past, who would you have it with? And we find that even therapeutically, some of these tools are taught as a way for people to access information beyond their five senses. I make no claim, but somehow, some way, like what Matt did, this is just one example that he and I have heard countless examples of people getting information going beyond their logic, going beyond their rational mind, somehow, some way getting info. And history is full of inventors, innovators, artists, musicians having breakthroughs where they get ideas in their dreams or they have a flash of insight or a thought that would cause that didn't make sense logically at first, but it worked.
right.
Wow. I just had a comment because I want our listeners to realize this is a tool that you could use to get information, to innovate, to solve problems, to get ideas, to, if you're an inventor, you're an entrepreneur, strategies. Listen to people. People do this, by the way. I suggest it's a natural state. It's just that our intention in the Silva method is to organize it, to structure it in a way that you can turn it on, so to speak, turn it off, and have more conscious competence rather than because a lot of times people get information and they have no idea how. I just know I can do it. And Jose wanted to move from unconscious competence to being more consciously competent, which is how we teach this tool now. You were going to say, Matt?
Well, I use my counselors and my laboratory almost every day at this point. Um, I know we teach in the classes, to practice once a day is good, twice a day is better, three times a day is excellent, and the amount of time that we teach or that we practice. Um, it's just so I try to practice every morning before I wake up or before I get out of bed. I'm sorry, not before I wake up. And then every night as I go to bed, I do a nighttime meditation as I go to sleep. And I tend to go to my laboratory at night with my counselors. One of the things that we teach in the 4-day immersion is when we're doing healing work, we should go to our laboratory and work with our counselors to bring up that healing energy. And I love that whole concept because it feels like we're getting help gathering that energy from the universe to send it out to people. So I do that at night. And I know you mentioned earlier that I'm of retirement age. I think retirement's a dirty word. I don't ever intend to retire. I think we all need to have something to do. It keeps us vital and rocking and rolling out there. Um, so, but at this age, I've come to realize that so many of my friends, my relatives, family, everybody, we're all starting to have ailments and aches and pains and illnesses and all that. So I make that part of my daily practice is that I gather up healing light and love and energy and I send it out to people. As Jose taught, the best way to heal yourself is to heal others. So that's something that I do every night when I go to bed. I have a session where I think of different people in my life that need some healing energy, and I gather that up, and it comes in from the universe. It passes through us and out to them. And I can't say that I have any personal stories about somebody saying, "Oh, I was feeling bad the other day, but I knew you were thinking of me, so I feel better." I don't have that, but I know of people who are feeling better, and I know that I've been sending them healing love and energy on a regular basis, and it can't. I don't think it can not help to do that. I think there's all kinds of examples out there in the world of prayer circles and whatever the different organizations and people use to help heal people. So I just make that a part of my everyday life to, when I go to bed at night, I go to my level, I go to my laboratory, I greet my counselors, and we just go through our list of names of people, friends, relatives, whoever I can think of, and I send out some healing energy into the world. I got to say that since I've been doing this, I can't remember being sick or hurting in at least 3 years now. Maybe it's been longer. I haven't really written it down and kept track of it. It's just that I don't get sick. The flu goes through our community and everybody's hacking and coughing, and I don't seem to get the flu. And I really put a lot of faith in the fact that I'm working with this healing light and love, and it's helping me as much as I'm sending it out to help other people.
Very cool, Matt. Uh, Allow me to comment too. You
Yeah.
know, I'm loving it. I told Matt when he and I were talking before this some weeks ago, this is one of my favorite tools also, and this idea. And the quick disclaimer is we are not physicians, we are not therapists, we're not prescribing. I have to say that. And I, like Matt, also, I really appreciate your honesty, Matt, and not exaggerating, because for over half a century, I've been scratching my head saying, was it the programming, the energizing, the sending the healing thoughts, or was it something else? I don't know. Nobody knows, and I don't care. But it's very interesting how often I've worked with hundreds of thousands of people in my own life, family, dear and near to me, who were given a death sentence by a doctor. You've got 3 years to live, and 8 years later, they're still kicking. A nephew who was told never would make it past the age of 30 and passed away at 61. So was it our silver community in the laboratory sending these? I don't know. And again, I don't care. We need a lot more research. And so some of the terms listeners are familiar with is prayer healing, as Matt said, distant healing, remote healing, more currently, call it what you will. But there's something about this. And even in medicine, there's a whole new field called, and I wish Jose were alive, energy medicine. And you hear people who are teachers of this, everything is energy. And we know that that is fact. Science tells us that. And we're all parts. So everything that's within me, within Matt, is within you. So somehow, some way, when we're in alignment with this field, this energetic expression, we can do good. We can connect with others subjectively. We can influence in a positive way. And that's really what Mr. Silva, and I'm sure Matt may remember, I can hear his voice. That was what his big interest was, healing. When he started recognizing in America, there are laws still, but in Mexico, not the same laws. And he kept hearing about healers. He was raised a Catholic background. He never heard of stuff like that other than prayer. So he started investigating. And then he thought, some of them seem like charlatans. Some of them seem like the real deal. Was it something he was always thinking? Was it something he could copy, learn, and then could he then pass it on to his children, which is what got the ball ball rolling. So it's a very advanced concept. And if I may add one other thing along this line is it's probably about 20 years ago, Institute of Noetic Sciences reported they did a study. They had their team of researchers locate in a 40, 50-year span, going back obviously, university studies, 140 experiments done, university studies, some call prayer, whatever different terms they use, healing at a distance, and better than two-thirds of them were statistically significant, meaning it went beyond just sheer happenstance. Currently, there are university studies which I'm looking forward to seeing, which are basically teaching us what mystics and spiritual leaders and philosophers, in their own words, have often said, as you give, so shall you receive. And I love that what Matt brought up about his own health. I would suggest to you, Matt, that that's an example because when we are in homeostasis, when we're in balance, our body takes care of itself. So it's not magic. The problem is we human beings get in our own way, don't we? And there's a lot of distress. And the quickest way to learn something is to teach it. The quickest way to feel good about yourself and feel fulfillment, happiness is so vague, is to volunteer, to serve. It's one of the reasons I find a guy like Matt, why he teaches this. It's him serving the community, guiding them, letting them know, you're not alone, number one. There are tools, there are things you can do to take command. And more importantly, dare I say, get to the truth of what really is going on. How do you know what you're hearing, wherever it's coming from, is actual fact or a falsehood or a made up story or an exaggeration? That to me, since we're having this conversation, what really moves me and drives me is I think the most important aspect of the Silva training is people awakening to this. And that's what Matt's saying. He has a tool that he uses to get information to guide him.
Yeah.
You want to add something else? Um,
Well, this is going a little off topic with laboratory and counselors, but and it's struck me so much recently, and I don't know if I'm quoting you from one of the classes that I took, or it's a repeating thing, and it would go to our mental house cleaning.
hmm.
That it is the first and biggest step that we all need to take to make our lives better lives. And just by clearing our minds and getting our minds straight, it helps us with everything else that we do in life. And it helps us in our laboratories and no matter what we're doing.
Could you be more specific? Because not everybody knows what mental house cleaning is. Why are you using it? What are you managing?
Well, you're managing how you think about things because so many people have negative thoughts. I know I used to have them all the time. I would just fly into rages while I was driving because other drivers are stupid and worse. I found that I don't do that as much anymore, or hardly at all anymore, because I changed the way that I look at things and think about things. Mental house cleaning is the way we teach it in class. I'll just kind of do that. Is that you catch yourself saying something negative, then you tell yourself cancel, cancel, and then immediately you look at the situation you're in and try to look at it in a more positive light. And I'll go back to the driving, when that person cuts you off in traffic and you first, oh, you jerk, you want to raise your fist at them and shake your fist and holler at them. And now I tell myself, cancel, cancel. They must be on their way to the emergency room or they're late for work. I try to look at it from the other person's point of view, and it it just helps me clear things, and it gives me I believe that by changing the way I look at things like that, it gives me more empathy towards other people.
Uh,
So,
it's,
and I
it's
think that's a
beautiful.
huge part of everything we do is changing the way we look at things and changing the way we think of things.
Wow. Thank you for bringing that up because the reminder is, again, I'm doing different interviews and we're focusing on topics. However, I would remind you, and what Matt is reminding us of, it's not any one tool or technique by itself. It's a condensed step-by-step system of tools that work together. And I think that's really not off topic, Matt. I think that's spot on because if we have stinking thinking, if we think we have beliefs like I can't do that, no way. And even with the driving, I'm laughing with you because I go through the same thing. And then you wake up and realize I've got the problem now. They're not even paying attention to me. Your mother wears combat boots. Where'd you get your license from? And they just keep doing it, whizzing in and out. And I'm the one like this
Yeah,
and what worse, we're adding distress. So again, it's not magic, but complaining only makes more complaints. Anger just produces more anger. We do more harm to ourselves when we repress anger and not are forgiving. See what I think that's beautiful what you're doing, Matt, because in doing that, maybe you're helping, maybe, but you're certainly not creating another problem. And maybe they're just rushing because that's the way they are. And maybe there is an emergency. We don't know.
right.
If I can add, you can use this too if you have, because I'd be doing that too. And even my wife driving says, "Would you stop?" And it's my way of releasing for the
Yeah,
guy of make comments. And I believe in the rule of law. We have a belief, a trust that people are going the correct direction on the highway and they're coming here. There's no divider. But if somebody ignores that and decides to go against traffic, that's dangerous to everybody. If
right.
somebody's zooming in and out and cutting people off, that's why there's so many accidents out there, so many freaking accidents because of reckless driving and then people not being quick enough to prevent it or to stop or tailgating, etc. And I know you know that, and this is not about preaching about that.
Right.
Again, it goes back that what Matt's saying is, how in the world could you be open to this advanced concept of the laboratory and accessing information from source, from the universe, from the field, from your inner self, from your spiritual guides? Again, I don't know for sure, but somehow, some we're doing that. If you've got that kind of thinking because you're going to be stressed out, and when the body's full of stress hormones, we go into survival mode, stress mode, and it blocks everything. Higher thinking functions, and there's no intuition. So we start with that in day one, and it's probably one of the most fundamental, most basic, and most important things to do because without that, and it's not about thinking positive, it's about perceiving, like Matt said more empathy for others and appreciation that everybody has their story and their situation, and we all have our own. And that's the one thing you can't control. I can control. We can't control what people do, what they say, but we can control our perspective, our viewpoint. And when we control that, it's like our world changes.
Yeah.
Nice one. Thanks for bringing that up. So I know from that, do you have any closing or parting thoughts? Anything more you wanted to say?
I think I covered everything I really had thought about it in advance here about laboratory and
Good.
counselors. And like I said, it's part of my daily life. I use it every night. I usually go to sleep at my laboratory level. So
But let me ask you this. When you imagine yourself within your laboratory dimension, as we call it, do you feel a sense of comfort? I know I do, or like you're with your team.
absolutely. I mean, my laboratory is in my mind, it is the most perfect place that I can be. I when I designed it, it has everything I've ever wanted in a place, and it I go there and I immediately feel like I'm at home. Like everything I need is there and available to me. My counselors, I love my counselors. They're people that I know that they're part of our higher self, and that's probably why mine are kind of smart Alex like me. But they keep me in my place, they keep me in my lane. Um, so yeah, it to me, it's one of our most powerful tools. I use it all the time. It's just such a comfortable, wonderful place for me to be is when I go to my laboratory.
Let me ask you another question though.
Yeah.
So when you're in that space, comfort, do you then find as you're moving through life, can you tell, do you find yourself experiencing more synchronicities, so-called coincidences, where you remember something that had slipped your mind, or there's a meaningful coincidence where you connect with someone or something that somehow, some way helps you to either it's supportive of you or solve a problem?
Oh yeah. I mean, I- I've got to tell you, since I've become a Silva instructor, since I started that journey to become one and have become one, um, I'm bragging
Yeah, brag a little.
here. My life has become easier. Things just seem to flow better. You know, that I seem to find that there's less problems going on in life, that things get done easier, that, like you mentioned, the synchronicities with other people, I find myself connecting with other people easier. Um, Keith taught me a thing. He says, if you find yourself in a busy, crowded place, an airport or wherever, and I did this few months ago when I was at Disney World with my daughter and the grandkids. He says, as you're walking through crowds, he says, just every once in a while, just put a smile on your face and go like this and see if anybody responds. And more often than not, somebody does. Somebody will give you a look and go like this and smile. So there's other Silva people in the world.
I
And
also hear you saying, Matt, is the way we think and what we feel, we know changes our brain chemistry,
right,
which changes our physiology, and we become like a magnet and we begin to attract like a magnet
right,
common denominators, people. So I would say that there's really no magic to it. And I love how science is catching up and helping us to explain more and more. But we know that, like you just said, the way we're thinking and feeling changes our own personal aura, our own field, makes us more or less attractive in that sense. What I was driving at with the synchronicities is that one of the biggest reasons why people are not getting what they want, one of the biggest reasons why people, maybe primary reason, not manifesting their goals or are unhappy or feeling unfulfilled is because they're living in survival mode. And I'm not talking about survival from the point of view of having enough food and money and so on. I'm talking about when our body gets flooded with stress hormones, it causes the brain, because the number one priority is survival, number two, security, into stress mode or survival mode. And when that happens, there's little or no intuition. There's little or no access to the higher thinking functions. So a lot of what we're doing with these tools is creating an alignment, if you will, with who we are, our connection. And I love what you said about flow. I know there's a lot of new research, very exciting, studying flow state, how it shows up with Navy SEALs, with teams, and so on and so forth. In this context, though, in the Silva training, we use it. Since Check Me High, the psychologist at Claremont University grad school way back, defined flow state as a feeling as if the universe has got your back. And Matt, you're a good example of that. It's not that he's perfect. I'm not perfect. And it's funny you said you feel like you're bragging. You're not bragging, but it's like things work out or you're attracting more. We still have challenges, but things work out because that's our mindset and you're doing the work. You're
yeah,
not just wanting it, thinking it, you're doing the inner work. You're keeping yourself balanced, and that's key. And I would like to give a closing thought about the laboratory counselors. It's
yeah,
a way to stay centered and balanced. Long story, just a little science piece. Even in 1973, at Trinity University, the Silva organization, Silva International, when Jose was still alive, there was a Dr. Richard McKenzie, who was a biofeedback expert at the time, working, helping people with migraine, to overcome it, and using biofeedback as a tool. He said, Jose, I know this stuff works. You had all these testimonials from people, all this anecdotal evidence, But do you know for fact, based on biofeedback, that when they use the technique you're teaching, 3-to-1 method, to go into the alpha, that they really are lowering their brain waves? So they did a study. It was an expensive study, and the answer was yes.
Yeah.
But what people don't know, and I think this little blue book that we've both flashed up before, I was going to grab it again, mentions briefly that study, something that happened unexpectedly. When they had people, someone just had an idea. I wonder what happens when they do caseworking, which is part of the Silva's methods forte. And I'm talking about the real deal, the coursework, not the home studies, not the Mind Valley 12 hours of pre-recorded videos. They're great, they're cool, people get good value from them. However, the real deal, if you're a serious student, is 4 days of training, not 3 days, not two, 4 days. That's what Mr. Silva taught us. That's what his research said, the period of time needed so that you reach everybody. There's literally an inner transformation that takes place. And what happened was some people, if you can see my chart here, Matt's got one behind him, is when they did what we call the 3-to-1 method, yep, their brainwaves changed, shifted, and they went, some of them very deep into alpha and theta, and they were fully awake. Some who were less experienced, low beta, high alpha, but they still made a change. And then they had them do what we teach in day 4 of the Silva immersion, caseworking, where they bring somebody into their laboratory, so to speak, in their imagination as if they're there, and use their intuition to tune into the person, to connect and get specifics about their condition. Not as a medical, just at a distance, always at a distance and privately, and then using the counselors and the laboratory dimension in a way that we teach, imagining healing, imagining correction, maybe doing a mirror of the mind, maybe a visualization. There's dozens of possibilities that we teach. When they had people do that, what happened was those who were very deep, they came out and leveled off at about 10.2555 cycles per second. Those who were very high, low beta, high alpha, they went deeper and leveled off at 10.2555. And each of the individuals sustained that all throughout while they were doing what Matt teaches and I teach, caseworking. And when that happened, that was kind of based on the science of the day, feedback, what we believe to be the natural healing frequency of when we're in alignment, when we're in balance, when we're in homeostasis, because the observation has been like Matt said. He said he's surrounded by people who have had COVID, sickness, flus, and not him. I've had similar experiences myself. And if I did contract it, I recover very quickly. I hear people going a week, 2 weeks, trouble recovering, or even a few days. It's been like maybe 24 hours, if that, and very mild. Again, make no claim, but it's kind of interesting. So the point is, and now there's some university studies, I don't have the study, I'm waiting to see it, that is showing that the healer, the person doing the projecting, gets more benefit than the healee, the person, the intended target, the person receiving. I'm talking at a distance, let alone even in some of our advanced work, we do this in some of the advanced courses, but in present with, with people. I get so excited about this because imagine the possibilities. What makes more sense to you? To lie awake at night and worry about your family, friends, or take some action that maybe just might help? And as Matt said so beautifully, it definitely won't hurt. Everything's on your side. And even more importantly, if you're worrying, worry just produces more worry. It's like a rocking chair, gives you something to do, gets you nowhere. And then we go into a stress state, and then it just compounds the negative aspects of it. So, wow, I know we could go on. And Matt, um, I just want to say thank you for making the time. Appreciate this. And could you tell us what is your website, how people could find you?
My website is silvamethodsouth.com. Pretty simple to get to. My phone number, my business phone number here in Florida is 352-462-1150. And that I only do Silva business on that number. So when it rings, I answer. Um, and I'm on YouTube and Facebook, and both of those are Silva Method South.
Excellent.
So
And by the way, as a friend remind everybody, that's easy, silvermethodsouth.com. It'll be on my YouTube channel. This video will be on Matt's YouTube channel. And that's an easy way then to contact us if you want more information or you want to explore more. And then also, usually in the more information, there'll be links if you want to visit the website. Mine is Silva Method of Connecticut or silvermethodct.com. I primarily teach in Chicago area, in the suburbs, and here in Connecticut, in a little village here. Comfortable. So thank you for staying to the end, folks. If you found this helpful or you know somebody who could benefit from it, please share this with somebody else. Uh, It'd be wonderful to meet you. I know Matt would for the classes. And until the next time, stay tuned for more to come. And again,
thank
Matt, thank you. And why don't you say a so long yourself, if you would?
yeah. I was just going to say thank you, Ken. I appreciate everything you do for me and for all of us instructors. I appreciate you doing these interviews with us, the conversations, because I think it helps all the Silva community. And I just want to thank everybody who watches this video and hope to see you.
All right. Until the next time, guys, keep getting, as Jose used to say, may the rest of your life be the best of your life.